Something went wrong. A terrifying trip in the Great Smoky Mountains. Prologue. The Great Smoky Mountains, with their towering peaks and dense forests, had always been a favorite destination for the Davis family. William, his wife Carol, and their 3 children, Brenda, Jeremy, and Ralphie, loved the sense of adventure and tranquility the mountains offered. But this trip would be different. This trip would become a nightmare. Chapter 1. The Drive. The Davis family packed their SUV early in the morning, eager to escape the city and immerse themselves in nature. The kids were excited, chattering about the hiking trails and the campfire stories they would share. William glanced at Carol, who smiled back at him. It was going to be a perfect family getaway. Chapter 2. Setting up camp. They arrived at their campsite in the late afternoon. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden hue over the landscape. William and Jeremy pitched the tents while Carol and Brenda prepared dinner. Ralphie, the youngest, explored the nearby woods, his imagination running wild with thoughts of woodland creatures. Chapter 3. A Strange Presence. As night fell, the family gathered around the campfire, roasting marshmallows and telling ghost stories. But an uneasy feeling settled over Carol. She kept glancing into the darkness, sensing something or someone watching them. She brushed it off as nerves, trying to enjoy the moment. Chapter 4. The First Night. The first night in the mountains was uneventful, but Carol's dreams were plagued by strange, shadowy figures. She woke up several times, convinced she heard footsteps outside the tent. Each time, she found nothing but the sound of the wind rustling the leaves. Chapter 5. The Hike. The next morning, the family set out on a hike. The trail was beautiful, leading them through dense forests and past stunning waterfalls. But the feeling of being watched persisted. Ralphie stumbled upon a strange, almost ritualistic arrangement of rocks and sticks. William dismissed it as the work of other campers, but Carol felt a chill run down her spine. Chapter 6. Disappearance. That evening, Carol decided to take a short walk to clear her mind. She never returned. William and the kids searched frantically, their calls echoing through the forest. Night fell, and there was still no sign of her. The feeling of dread grew stronger. Chapter 7. The Horrifying Discovery. The next morning, they found Carol's body. She had been brutally murdered, her skin and eyes removed. The sight was too much for the children. Brenda and Jeremy were in shock, while Ralphie sobbed uncontrollably. William felt a mix of grief and rage. Who could have done this? Chapter 8. Panic and Fear. William decided they needed to leave immediately, but their car wouldn't start. The panic set in. They were stranded, with a killer on the loose. They gathered their belongings and started on foot towards the nearest ranger station, hoping to find help. Chapter 9. Another Loss. As they trekked through the forest, Ralphie wandered off again. This time he didn't come back. When they found him, his fate was the same as Carol's. The horror of it all was overwhelming. William felt helpless, unable to protect his family. Chapter 10. Signs of the Killer. William noticed strange markings on the trees, almost like symbols. They seemed to form a path leading deeper into the forest. Against his better judgment, he decided to follow them, hoping to find the killer and end this nightmare. Chapter 11. A Glimmer of Hope. The family stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin. Inside, they found a radio and managed to send out a distress call. But there was no guarantee anyone would hear it in time. They fortified the cabin as best they could and waited, every noise outside sending chills down their spines. Chapter 12. The hunter becomes the hunted. As night fell, the killer made his presence known. He toyed with them, leaving more grotesque symbols and remains of animals around the cabin. William realized they were not dealing with an ordinary human. The precision of the killings, the strange symbols, it was almost as if they were dealing with something otherworldly. Chapter 13. The Alien Theory. Jeremy, always the imaginative one, suggested they might be dealing with aliens. The idea seemed ludicrous, but given the circumstances, William couldn't dismiss it entirely. The killer's methods were unlike anything he had ever seen. Chapter 14. A Desperate Plan. With supplies running low and no help in sight, William devised a desperate plan. He would confront the killer while Brenda and Jeremy made a run for it. He couldn't bear the thought of losing more of his family. Chapter 15. The Confrontation. William set out into the forest, armed with a makeshift weapon. He followed the symbols, feeling the killer's eyes on him. The confrontation was brutal. The killer was not an alien, but a deranged man who had been living in the mountains, driven Ma.